Welcome to Series 3 of The Joy of Writing. I'm your host, Mark Carew, author of 3 novels, and someone who is interested in how other writers write, why they do it, and the fun or joy they get from their writing. You can leave feedback on any of the episodes at podchaser.com/The Joy of Writing. My guest in this episode is Tom Benjamin, author of A Quiet Death in Italy, his debut crime novel, and the first of a series of 3 books. A Quiet Death in Italy was published by Constable, part of the Little Brown Group, last year in ebook and this May 2020 in paperback. So Tom, your book A Quiet Death in Italy begins with a visit to the morgue for your protagonist, the English private investigator Daniel Lester. The body in question is sent there because Daniel's working for his father-in-law, the Comandante Giovanni. They've been hired to investigate this problem, and one of the flags you put in it is that the body is in a black bag rather than a white bag, which everybody knows that a white bag is an accidental death. The black bag suggests something else. Did that come from? Is that the actual procedure? Or was that just something you wanted to sort of play with?
That was research.
Yeah.
That was definitely research. I was looking into how morgues, some morgues, I'm sure not all morgues, but some morgues treat, victims of suspicious death. The inspiration for that scene did actually come from real life when I was with the Met Police working as a spokesperson, and went down to the Thames River Police, and they just dragged a body out of the Thames, and there it was lying there. And these were the days. I mean, we're talking about probably the early 90s now, where let's just say things were a little bit more flexible. And so, police officers had no problem, showing the young press officer, oh, look what we've got here. And if you have the courage to take a look, and we had a long conversation about victims of drowning and all the people they were pulling out of the river and so on, and which is from where I derived certainly the detail. Yeah. And probably the inspiration for the discovery of Paolo's body down in the canals. Yeah,
I mean, one of the details is that river water is very corrosive.
Yeah.
And so I noted that, if ever needed.
It's one of the best ways, according to the cop that was talking, because really it's like some sort of acid, and it does kind of corrode wash away a lot of evidence. Yeah.
How would you describe Paolo? An anarchist or an old communist, or
I'd say a veteran political activist. As it becomes clear from his journals, he was a young student in the late 70s, early 80s, and became involved with the far left at university. That sort of tumbled into becoming involved in the Red Brigades, which were the far left terrorists, Italian terrorists of their time, the Italian equal to the Baader-Meinhof gang, and with a similar political ideology, and most notorious, of course, for the murder of the Italian Prime Minister at that time.
And as the scene plays out, and subsequently, there's just this assumption in the plot that, well, you know how he ended up there. The police have dealt with him.
Yeah, I mean, because there is, and this is something that comes out, and I think that it's part of Daniel's character, development arc. He comes to realise that there is this, tremendous sort of tension in Italian society. Between the state, various groups on the left, and probably on the right for that matter, there would be an assumption, looking at the history, that the police would have probably been involved in his death. The famous play An Accidental Death of an Anarchist, which I obviously refer to in the novel, is all about precisely that subject.
Yeah, no, I mean the tensions came through, and really they're a big plot driver I found. So, for example, you have what we would call the anarchists, or those squatting out in parts of the city. The police are trying to clear them out, and they have slogans like "Give us bread, not ice cream,"
Yeah.
which refers to the mayor, Carlo, who the husband of Marta. Marta was having an affair with Paolo, but the mayor is behind the regeneration of the city into boutique Bologna.
Yeah, I mean, this was something I kind of came across when we arrived, really, over a dozen years ago, and it was the transformation of the city from how it had been to how it was going to become.
Yes.
And there was this tremendous tension between, the anarchist movement, which was occupying many of the old empty buildings, particularly things like old hospitals, army barracks, and so on in Bologna, and the commune or the council, which wanted to sort of re-energise the centre and had sort of discovered tourism, arguably, to the detriment of many of the Bolognese, not just the activists, but also the ordinary people. I mean, when we arrived, we were able to basically wander into any historic building, even art gallery, for nothing. It was seen as sort of communal sort of treasure. And, about 6 or 7 years ago, they started charging everywhere. And you had to sort of pay an entrance fee. It's a small thing. I think it's kind of, and also, you found, there's been this explosion of, they've been promoting Bologna, city of food, this explosion of eateries, expensive eateries, prices have gone up everywhere, and so on. So it's a process that the city's been going through, and particularly with the increase in Airbnb and so on. And that was the beginning of the fight against that. And so it's so a quiet death in Italy could almost be said to also represent the death of a kind of Bologna, a death of a kind of Italy, the kind of famous communist communal Bologna being replaced by a more modern, gentrified, touristificated city. And a lot of Bolognese were unhappy about it.
Yeah.
These kind of, the tour groups kind of crowding, behind a pennant, crowding the porticos and so on. And I think that actually one could say that, this was perhaps the beginning, and the second book I've written, The Hunting Season, which is all about Bologna, city of food, and that business, is perhaps consistent with that, telling that story. We've moved on a bit from the first part.
So you're really detailing the the tension here in the city between the development or those who want to keep it the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of tension kind of throws up old phantoms, kind of throws up both kind of ghosts from the past in more ways than one, because they're both being used by kind of actors in the commune or the council, and also are also representative in some of the older anarchists.
Yes.
Who, like Mario and like Paolo, who have been fighting it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like an old battle is being kind of fought out between these two opposing forces.
That's one of the things I liked about it, was how you humanized it, and you went back in the history to the 70s when your characters were younger, quite young students, really. You've really used the idea that crime fiction can be social fiction in this sort of investigation of a modern city.
Career-wise, I've always been interested in social issues, with a background in policing and international development, and that's just what I'm interested in, and that's what I'm interested in exploring. I think that when I came here, I wanted to write a book about the Italy that I was seeing, which was like an Italy that wasn't what most people expect from Italy. Yeah. And that was just really fascinating.
What were the characters that were most fun to write? Was it your detective? Was it other characters?
Well, my detective was fun to write in so much as he is the narrator. So he has all the best lines.
Yeah.
Although Franco was fun, who's one of the old elderly communists, I think he has some of the best lines, or rather, he feeds Daniel some of the best lines, and also Dolores. Was fun too, and I think that both of them also were really quite typical Bolognese sorts of characters. You have Dolores, the young anarchist, and you have Franco, the old communist. And also I like Dolores because she's quite a good foil to Daniel, and she's an insider and an outsider. They're both insider outsiders, but in different ways. If you see them, she's properly Italian. She's part of the anarchist movement, but she's also a rebel.
Yes.
Well,
what do you call it? A punker
bestia. A punker bestia.
Punker bestia, yeah. And there's a lovely scene when she's introduced with a cow.
Yes.
Which I know is not the original you had in mind for it, but it works so well because one of the slogans is "Farming is the future."
Yes.
Whereas the mayor was thinking, well, no, another gelateria, or however you say it, is the future.
Yeah.
And an expensive hotel in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun to see that coming out. And Paolo and Marta and Carlo, these are central characters.
Yeah, because you spend time in their company.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point. Both the reader and the writer spends time in the company of these people. And I think that both for the writer and the reader, they have to become real people.
Agreed.
And so even if they're not particularly nice, they have to be interesting. And I think that's key for every writer. I think, if they're boring, that's boring.
Yeah.
You want your baddies to be interesting as well as your goodies.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's harder to make the goodies interesting than the baddies, obviously.
Well, sometimes the baddies get a lot of the good lines, the great action, and the more exciting things to do.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly you've got character-driven fiction here, which is great because it goes back so deeply to what people actually believe in. And their vision for the city.
Yeah.
And for how life should be for other people. That was very interesting indeed. I was going to just ask. There is a murder, obviously, of Paolo. And did you intend for the reader to work out who the murderer might be?
No, not really. So, A Quiet Death in Italy was my second go at this. I'd written a book previously, which hadn't found an agent, let alone a publisher. And so I went through a whole process of sending, of seeking help, basically. I went to a literary consultancy. And decided, well, look, I am trying to sell this as crime fiction. I really ought to learn the rules. And so even though I want to discuss all of this stuff, I also need to produce and present a book that works as crime fiction.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, the first book, the first attempt, and probably all of my previous attempts at writing fiction had been very much as a pantser, whereas this one was kind of like a pantser with a plot in mind, in so much as I was going to write it, but I, at the same time, was aware that there was a structure. There is a way that you sort of structure crime fiction, so you satisfy the crime reader. I think is right. Because every story, like every song, like every popular song, and so on, does have structure, and I'm sure even Shakespeare, worked to lots of structure in his plays, and so it's not enough to think, well, I'm just fab and I'm just going to write all these wonderful sentences and people will love it. You have to be a bit humble and follow structure. So, although I set out not knowing who the murderer was going to be, about midway through I sort of got a feeling about who the murderer would be. And I did know that when I came to the end of the book that I would probably go back and rejig it, structure it, rewrite it, so that it would be written in a structural way. So there were the kind, so there is this kind of traditional progression for the crime reader, so they can basically try to unravel the mystery themselves. To be honest with you, I was. And you do seed clues in the narrative. If you read it a second time, knowing who the murderer is at the end, you should be able to see the clues as you go through. So it shouldn't be completely impossible to work out who the murderer is.
I mean, clues and motive actually is very important. I mean, on the face of it, I mean, it's the mayor's wife having an affair with the dead person. You think, well, the mayor's, sorted this out. So, yes, and what about red herrings? Is that fun to do in the plot?
Raymond Chandler wrote the kind of, the classic rules for writing crime fiction. And, one of them, I think, which is quite important, is to, you should always have a very human motive.
Right.
To commit a murder.
Yeah.
To make it convincing, and I think that is quite important because they're the things that really drive us. In the same way as you were talking earlier about the way that the characters were driven by meaning and by what they believed in.
Yeah,
that people are driven by meaning, even if the meaning in their life, or they interpret the meaning in their life as making money or whatever. People are driven by existential motives fundamentally.
Yeah.
And so it is important for there to be a sort of a human reason to commit a murder.
Yes, exactly.
So coming back to your other point about red herrings, yes, I think that, and I'm also thinking at the moment that a lot, as I'm writing book 3, about red herrings and how one sort of structures the plot and the story and so on and so forth. I think that it's fun writing red herrings, but I think at the same time they need to be believable. To sort of flow at the same time. They need to sort of tell a story in themselves.
Yeah,
if they're kind of like just red herrings. It's a bit Agatha Christie.
Yes,
which I don't think is what people are looking for these days. And so they need to sort of tell a story in themselves. They need to be consistent with the meaning of the story. So when people kind of walk away from the story, they think, oh well, there may be someone that they thought was the murderer, but they might also think, well, that person had a good reason to be the murderer, and I learned an interesting thing while I followed that thread.
Yeah,
and I think
I've got that. Yeah, motives very interesting. There are sort of several varieties of motives, aren't there? Some really, really obvious, and some more sort of deep lying, without wishing to give anything away. The motive for Daniel, the English investigator, just looking at the back of the book and the blurb, Daniel must unravel a web of secrets, deceit and corruption before he is caught in it in himself. Now this is interesting because he is knee-deep in the story, obviously. And what is driving him? It's not simple. Is it simply justice or simply a job or...
Well, I think it's his. I mean, he is the tarnished knight, and as he mentions to Dolores at some stage, he's no innocent himself. He was a beneficiary of restorative justice, and so to some extent, he doesn't pretend to be an angel. He has his own sort of demons. He's motivated to stay in. And again, he's motivated to stay in Italy because really there's no future for him in the UK, and he has this family in Italy, which is really important to him. And I think that his investigation into the death of Paolo Solitudine, in a sense, I think he associates with him a bit, because, you know, particularly the Paolo who he discovers through the journals, you know, there's this, you know, innocent guy who wanted to sort of, you know, change the world.
Right.
And you know, even, you know, when he gets to a point which sort of seems a bit like a dead end, you know, you can see that he's really got a relationship with this guy through the journals. And, you know, he goes to the sort of, you know, the country house that Paolo shared with Marta.
Yeah, that's a good scene. Yeah.
You can see he simply by that point he simply, you know, he's motivated by this relationship that he has with Paolo.
I mean, he's more sympathetic with the cause that Paolo was fighting for, isn't he? Really.
Yeah, because he has this background as someone who wanted to right wrongs.
Yeah.
You know, as an investigative journalist, and I think that he sympathises with that as well. But I think that he also kind of understands the complexity of causes, and, you know, things aren't black and white, and I think that comes out quite strongly in the narrative.
Completely, it's not a black and white novel at all. It's a really nice, in-depth, fascinating look at the life and history of a city. Bologna now will not be the same on the map for me. It'll be like, okay, I know about this now. the anarchists, the PD party, and what went on. Much more interesting than trying to figure out, you know, was it Miss Marple in the library with the revolver?
Although there is a place for that.
There totally is a place for that. Usually on a, you know, quiet winter's day with a roaring fire and a glass of wine. But there's so much more to crime fiction. I can see that. So thank you. I enjoyed the book a great deal and enjoyed talking to you as well.
Thanks for having me, and it really has been a pleasure to participate in this. So thanks very much.
In the next episode, I will be talking to Tom about how he marked the publication of his book during lockdown and how he is writing further books in the Daniel Lester series.